Well, that was awkward, right? That's great. Okay. So in this class, we're going to be looking at the I am statements of Jesus. How many of you know how many of them there are? That's okay. Before I started studying for this, I wouldn't have been able to answer that question either. But there are 7 and kind of 8, depending on whether you count one of them, but we'll talk about that. So the 7 that we're primarily going to look at in this class are all in the book of John. And the first one we're going to look at tonight is I am the bread of life. So I'm going to give you each of the statements and then kind of give you a little summary of sort of the application that we're going to look at in this class. So the first one is I am the bread of life. As bread sustains physical life, so Christ offers and sustains spiritual life. I am the bread of life. The second one is I am the light of the world. To a world lost in darkness, Christ offers himself as a guide. I am the light of the world. Number 3, I am the door of the sheep. Jesus protects his followers as shepherds protect their flocks from predators. I am the door of the sheep. Number 4, I am the resurrection and the life. Death is not the final word for those in Christ. I am the resurrection and the life. Number 5, I am the good shepherd. Jesus is committed to caring and watching over those who are his. I am the good shepherd. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Number 6, Jesus is the source of all truth and knowledge about God. I am the way, the truth, and the life. And number 7, I am the true vine. By attaching ourselves to Christ, we enable his life to flow in and through us. Then we cannot help but bear fruit that will honor the Father. I am the true vine. So when you think about I am, the statement I am, what portion of the Bible comes to mind? Yeah, Moses, right? So in the book of Exodus, that's really where we kind of see the first mention of the phrase I am, and we'll look at that tonight. But when it comes to Jesus, in Mark chapter 8, we won't take time to turn there, but in Mark chapter 8, Jesus asked his disciples a really simple question. He said, "Whom say ye that I am?" He's asking them, what do you think of me? Who do you think I am? Who do you say that I am? And the answer to that question, when answered personally in each of our lives, has eternal significance. It really does. When we answer that question, who do I say that Christ is? Not just who do I say that he is, but who do I believe that he is? So, who do you say that he is? Is he a prophet, priest, king, the Son of God, God the Son? Well, I think one of the best ways for us to understand who Jesus is to look at what he said about himself. So that's what we're going to do in this class. And I want it to be as interactive as possible. I don't want this to be like a preaching session. So talk to me. I'll talk to you. If you have questions, just shout them out. I'll ask you guys some questions. We'll have a good time together. So, and amen, right? So all of these statements are in the book of John that we're going to look at. But before we get into the ones in John, let's turn to Exodus 3, and we'll look at the first mention in Scripture of that phrase, I am, so we can kind of get a sense of what it means. Because when Jesus said, I am, his followers knew exactly what he meant when he said that. So in Exodus chapter 3, and we'll just start from the beginning of the chapter. Exodus 3. Now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the backside of the desert and came to the mountain of God, even to Horeb. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. And Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burnt. And when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called unto him out of the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here am I. And he said, Draw not nigh hither, put off thy shoes from off thy feet, for the place whereon thou standest is holy ground. Moreover, he said, I am the God of thy father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people which are in Egypt, and have heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. And I am come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land unto a good land and a large, unto a land flowing with milk and honey, unto the place of the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites. Now therefore, behold, the cry of the children of Israel is come unto me, and I have also seen the oppression wherewith the Egyptians oppressed them. Come now therefore, and I will send thee unto Pharaoh, that thou mayest bring forth my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. And Moses said unto God, Who am I, that I should go unto Pharaoh, and that I should bring forth the children of Israel out of Egypt? And he said, Certainly I will be with thee, and this shall be a token unto thee, that I have sent thee. When thou hast brought forth the people out of Egypt, ye shall serve God upon this mountain. And Moses said unto God, Behold, when I come unto the children of Israel, and shall say unto them, The God of your fathers hath sent me unto you, and they shall say to me, What is his name? What shall I say unto them? And God said unto Moses, what? I am that I am, or I am who I am. And he said, Thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, I am hath sent me unto you. And God said moreover unto Moses, Thus shalt thou say to the children of Israel, The Lord God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, hath sent me unto you. This is my name forever, and this is my memorial unto all generations. So what does the phrase I am in relation to when God says, I am that I am? What does that mean to you? I'm sorry? He's everything, yeah. What else? Mm-hmm. Yeah, he just is, right? He always has been. He didn't have a beginning. He won't have an end. He just is. I am that I am. Not only that, but he's complete in himself, right? He stands alone. He is personal, independent, self-existent being. He simply is. And so when God says that that's his name, I am, that tells us a lot about God. And really just, it's hard to understand, and yet it needs no explanation, as weird as that kind of is, that he just is. It's really an amazing phrase. And probably the eighth I am statement that Jesus made in the book of John was when he said, Before Abraham was, I am. And that was a reference to the deity of Christ. That was a reference to the fact that Jesus is God in the flesh, because his followers would have known exactly what he meant when he said, Before Abraham was, I am. They would have known exactly what he was talking about. He was referencing back to this passage where God said, I am that I am. So God's I am statement in Exodus was so full that it just encompassed everything that God is. He just is. And it really needs no qualifier. God just says, I am. It's kind of like in the book of Genesis where it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In the beginning of all things, time, space, matter, in that beginning, God created. Meaning, he was already there. He was already existent. He was already present because he just is. So let's go to John 6, and we will jump into these I am statements now that we kind of have an understanding of the significance of this phrase. And of course, Christ says several phrases about himself that begin with I am. The first one's in John chapter 6, and it's I am the bread of life. Again, our list here, I am the bread of life. As bread sustains physical life, so Christ offers and sustains spiritual life. I am the bread of life. So John chapter 6, and we're just going to kind of take our time reading through this chapter, and we'll kind of see where it lands us, so to speak. And we will read Let's see. Let's go down through. Well, let's start at least in the beginning of the chapter, and we'll read kind of, for context, we'll read about what happened before Jesus makes this statement, I am the bread of life. John chapter 6. After these things, Jesus went over the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias, and a great multitude followed him, because they saw his miracles, which he did on them that were diseased. And Jesus went up into a mountain, and there he sat with his disciples. And the Passover, a feast of the Jews, was nigh. When Jesus then lifted up his eyes and saw a great company come unto him, he saith unto Philip, Whence shall we buy bread that these may eat? And this he said to prove him, for he himself knew what he would do. Philip answered him, 200 pennyworth of bread is not sufficient for them, that every one of them may take a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, saith unto him, There is a lad here, which hath 5 barley loaves and 2 small fishes, but what are they among so many? And Jesus said, Make the men sit down. Now there was much grass in the place, so the men sat down, and number about 5,000. And Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed to the disciples, and the disciples to them that were set down, and likewise of the fishes, as much as they would. When they were filled, he said unto his disciples, Gather up the fragments that remain, that nothing be lost. Therefore they gathered them together, and filled 12 baskets with the fragments of the 5 barley loaves, which remained over and above unto them that had eaten. Then those men, when they had seen the miracle that Jesus did, said, This is of a truth that prophet that should come into the world. So we see here a miracle, an amazing miracle, the feeding of the 5,000, right? But let me ask you a few questions about this situation and this miracle. First question, why were the crowds following Jesus? We find it pretty early on in the chapter. Yeah, because they wanted to see miracles, and they had seen miracles that he'd done to heal the sick, right? Amazing thing. So knowing that, if you were in this crowd and you were following Jesus because you had seen what he had done to heal the sick, what request would you make of him? You don't have to answer, but think about it. What request would you make of him? Maybe you were sick. Maybe you had a sick family member, and you saw the miracles that he had done in healing the sick, and you knew that this was a man who could heal people. You'd probably make that kind of a request. Then down in verse number 5, when Jesus then lifted up his eyes and saw a great company come unto him, he saith unto Philip, Whence shall we buy bread that these may eat? And then look at verse 6. And this he said to prove him, for he himself knew what he would do. So why do you think Jesus asked Philip where they could buy bread if he already knew what was going to happen? Why do you think he did? Why ask a question you already know the answer to? Yeah, to test him, to prove him. What was he trying to test? Right, yeah, he's trying to test his faith, right? To see, is Philip gonna trust me? Now, of course, he already knows, not only does he know what he's going to do, he also knows what Philip's answer is going to be, and he knows everything about Philip's faith, right? But this also is documented for us for a reason, so that we can see the reason why Jesus was asking these questions. Let's go over to Mark chapter 6, and we'll look at what Mark says about this story. Mark chapter 6. And beginning in verse 30. And the apostles gathered themselves together unto Jesus, and told him all things, both what they had done and what they had taught. And he said unto them, Come ye yourselves apart into a desert place, and rest a while. For there were many coming and going, and they had no leisure so much as to eat. And they departed into a desert place by ship privately. And the people saw them departing, and many knew him, and ran afoot thither out of all cities, and outwent them, and came together unto him. And Jesus, when he came out, saw much people, and was moved with compassion toward them, because they were as sheep not having a shepherd. and he began to teach them many things. And when the day was now far spent, his disciples came unto him and said, This is a desert place, and now the time is far past. Send them away, that they may go into the country round about, and into the villages, and buy themselves bread, for they have nothing to eat. He answered and said unto them, Give ye them to eat. And they say unto him, Shall we go and buy 200 pennyworth of bread and give them to eat? And on it goes, and it's a very similar account to what we read in the book of John. But the disciples suggested going into a village nearby to get bread, right? What does that tell us about their understanding of who Jesus is? Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it, right? They don't get it. They are thinking in a very humanistic manner, right? And thinking in a way very similar to probably how I would be thinking, given the same situation. Well, we've got all these people, we've got to feed them. Where are we gonna get bread? We got to get bread for these people. Can I go to Walmart? Can I go to Stop and Shop? Can that's what I'd be thinking. Like, what store can I go to? Who's got money so we can go and get some bread? We've got to feed these people, right? But in this case, they had somebody there who was God in the flesh. They didn't have to go to a village to get bread. But let's go back to John 6 and look at what Jesus said. And this was an amazing miracle to feed so many people. But beyond the physical feeding of these people, this was a teaching moment for Jesus, for these crowds of people. Because if you saw him feed 5,000 people, especially if you were one of them, he would have your attention, right? I mean, obviously this is an unusual person. Obviously this is something amazing that has happened. And he had their attention at this point. And so he uses it as a teaching moment. And in John chapter 6, and down in, let's see, verse, let's see, how far back do I want to go? Sorry, guys. Well, that's where I want to end up. All right. So, in reading through the rest of it, well, let's just read it. We got time. So we ended off in verse 14, so let's just go on. Verse 15. When Jesus therefore perceived that they would come and take him by force to make him a king, he departed again into a mountain himself alone. And when even was now come, his disciples went down unto the sea, and entered into a ship, and went over the sea toward Capernaum. And it was now dark, and Jesus was not come to them. And the sea arose by reason of a great wind that blew. So when they had rowed about 25 or 30 furlongs, they see Jesus walking on the sea, and drawing nigh unto the ship, and they were afraid. But he saith unto them, It is I, be not afraid. Then they willingly received him into the ship, and immediately the ship was at the land whither they went. The day following, when the people which stood on the other side of the sea saw that there was none other boat there, save that one whereunto his disciples were entered, and that Jesus went not with his disciples into the boat, but that his disciples were gone away alone, howbeit there came other boats from Tiberias nigh unto the place where they did eat bread, after the Lord has given thanks. When the people therefore saw that Jesus was not there, neither his disciples, they also took shipping and came to Capernaum, seeking for Jesus. So they go over to Capernaum. This great crowd of people follows them, right? They want to find Jesus. Took shipping and came to Capernaum, seeking for Jesus. Verse 25, and when they had found him on the other side of the sea, they said unto him, Rabbi, when camest thou hither? Jesus answered them and said, Verily, verily, I say unto you, you seek me, not because you saw the miracles, but because you did eat of the loaves and were filled. Interesting. They were seeking him not because of the miracles so much as because, what? They were hungry, right? I mean, I like bread, right? I probably didn't have to tell you that for you to know, right? But they were hungry, so they're following him, and that's what he calls them out on. He says, you seek me not because you saw the miracles, but because you ate the bread, and it filled you up. Verse 27, though, labor not for the meat which perisheth, but for that meat which endureth unto everlasting life, which the Son of Man shall give unto you. For him hath God the Father sealed. Then they said unto him, What shall we do, that we might work the works of God? Jesus answered and said unto them, This is the work of God, that you believe on him whom he hath sent. They said therefore unto him, What sign showest thou then, that we may see and believe thee? What dost thou work? Where have you been? Have you not seen these miracles? Right? Our fathers did eat manna in the desert. As it is written, he gave them bread from heaven to eat. Then Jesus said unto them, Verily, verily, I say unto you, Moses gave you not that bread from heaven, but my Father giveth you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is he which cometh down from heaven, and giveth life unto the world. Then said they unto him, Lord, evermore give us this bread. And Jesus said unto them, I am the bread of life. He that cometh to me shall never hunger, and he that believeth on me shall never thirst. But I said unto you that ye also have seen me, and believe not. All that the Father giveth me shall come unto me, and him that cometh to me I will in no wise cast out. For I came down from heaven not to do mine own will, but the will of him that sent me. And this is the Father's will which hath sent me, that of all which he hath given me I should lose nothing, but should raise it up again at the last day. And this is the will of him that sent me, that every one which seeth the Son and believeth on him may have everlasting life, and I will raise him up at the last day. The Jews then murmured at him, because he said, I am the bread which came down from heaven. And they said, Is not this Jesus, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? How is it then that he saith, I came down from heaven? Jesus therefore answered and said unto them, Murmur not among yourselves. No man can come to me except the Father which hath sent me draw him, and I will raise him up at the last day. It is written in the prophets, and they shall be all taught of God. Every man therefore that hath heard and hath learned of the Father cometh unto me. Not that any man hath seen the Father, save he which is of God. He hath seen the Father. Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that believeth on me hath everlasting life. I am that bread of life. Your fathers did eat manna in the wilderness, and are dead. This is the bread which cometh down from heaven, that a man may eat thereof and not die. I am the living bread which came down from heaven. If any man eat of this bread, he shall live forever. And the bread that I will give is my flesh, which I will give for the life of the world. There's a whole lot to unpack there, right? But he says, I am the bread of life. Bread provides sustenance for us, right? Bread, among other things, bread provides carbohydrates that our body needs to convert into energy. So in that sense, it provides energy. It provides life, if you will, in that sense. But since Jesus is the bread of life, let's look at the word life in the Bible. There's actually two words that our English Bible translates as life. The first word, bios, means literal physical life. Breath in your lungs, a beating heart, bios, that's life. Physical, literal life. The second, though, zoe, means possessed with vitality, a living soul. So this is really the difference between physical life and spiritual life, right? So when Jesus says, I am the bread of life, we've got to see which one he's talking about here and what he really means. Bios is only used in Scripture 10 times, whereas zoe is used 135 times, the word life. So what does the use of these terms tell us? Why is it significant that one is used so much more often than the other? Is there a significance to that? Why might that be? Well, I think that maybe it's because the spiritual life has much more importance and much more significance even than our physical life, this temporal body that we live in, our beating heart, our breathing lungs. that Zoe life has a lot more significance to it. But when Jesus says that he is the bread of life, he's actually saying that he satisfies both of those, right? He satisfies both our bios life needs and our Zoe life needs. We have to have both. Have you ever been really, really hungry? Like really, really hungry? Like I'm literally just going to go and kill an animal and eat it because I am so hungry, right? If you have, then you know how powerful it would be for someone to offer you something at that moment of this great physical hunger that would satisfy that hunger, right? If you've ever been really, really hungry, you know exactly what I'm talking about. When someone says, here, I made you a sandwich. Wow, that's great. And you just devour it, right? But when we talk about spiritual life and spiritual hunger, what is spiritual hunger? What does that even mean? Help me out. What does it mean to be spiritually hungry? Yes, sir. Just. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any other thoughts on that? Spiritual hunger? Yeah. Sure, yeah. Seeking after God, even to someone who doesn't know God, right? Yeah, spiritual hunger. Why is spiritual hunger so much harder to recognize than physical hunger? Because you can be hungry and not even know it, right? Josh, what do you think?
Because you know when you're physically hungry, you know what can satisfy it. That's spiritual.
Yeah.
Especially as a loss, you don't know what can fill that void or satisfy it.
Right. Yeah, and sometimes you can be hungry and not know it, right? Even physically, right? Sometimes, I'll be at home with my wife and she'll say to me, you need to eat something. What are you talking about? You're hungry. I'm not hungry. Yes, you are. Right? Because she can tell just by my mood or by my affect, that I'm hungry. I need to eat something. Maybe I'm getting, a little short with her or maybe, I just seem irritable, whatever the case may be. And I can tell the same thing of her, by the way, and I'll tell her sometimes, you need to eat something. But so sometimes we can be physically hungry and not know it. So even more so, it would stand to reason that we can be spiritually hungry and not recognize it, right? That we can be spiritually, not just hungry, but spiritually starving. Again, Jesus said in verse 26 that the reason that they were following him was not because they saw the miracles. It wasn't the spiritual side. The reason they were following him was because they ate the bread and they ate their fill. That's why they were following him. Let me ask you an important question, and I think it was a convicting question to me. Do you think that people would try to fill their spiritual hunger if all of their physical needs were continually met? Yeah. If all your physical needs were continually met all the time, whether that's food, whether that's shelter, water, whatever the case may be, comfort, if all your physical needs were continually met, do you think it would be harder or easier to recognize a spiritual hunger? I think it'd be a lot harder. And we see that so much like in our culture, don't we? Because we have such a comfortable, cushy life as people that live in America, right? This country has so many creature comforts that we would be just completely would lose our minds if we didn't have, right? Things that are not even necessary, just things that are nice to have. And yet, if we didn't have them, our whole mood would change. It would ruin our day, right? Like if I went out of the house in the morning, right, and I didn't have this thing with me, and I couldn't go back home to get it, that would be frustrating, right? That Doesn't make the day just like, man, this stinks. I don't have my phone. I can't call anybody. I can't text him. I can't look at Facebook. You know what I mean? It's like if you didn't have that, right, it would affect you. And yet, I don't need one of these. Like, how many millions of people live in the world and have never even seen one of these, right? So when we have our physical needs met, it's a lot harder for us to recognize our spiritual hunger. So it was hard for the crowd to get that feeding of the 5,000 out of their mind, and how they might get some more of that bread, that free food, right? I love free food, don't you? Isn't it great? It's awesome. So Jesus went on to try to get them to understand that it wasn't, the bread and the fish wasn't what they needed, right? Like it was, they need sustenance, they need physical food, but that's not the true need of their soul. And so even though Jesus used bread to illustrate eternal life, the people's minds were still on the bread that they ate the day before. So not understanding the spiritual meaning behind Jesus' words, they insisted that Jesus give them the bread so that they could eat as Moses had given manna to their ancestors, right? And then they asked him an interesting question. They said in verse number 28, "Then said they unto him, What shall we do that we might work the works of God?" And Jesus' response was interesting. He said, "This is the work of God, that you believe on him whom he hath sent." So that's interesting. So the work is just to believe, right? Believing is the work, is what he's saying there. You believe on Christ whom he has sent. So I guess the kind of what I'm trying to drive at here, how do we guard against the kind of never-ending to-do list that can come with being a Christian? How do we guard against that? Like, we have this list of all these things, and maybe I don't think any of us actually write out a list, but I'm saying like there's a list, right, in our minds maybe of these things that we want to do in order to be a good Christian, right? How do we guard against that list? How do we guard against making for ourselves that sort of do this, do this, do this? How do we do that? How do we do it? Well, I think the way we do it is that we recognize that Jesus is our satisfaction, right? He is the bread of life, and the bread of life never runs out and gives exceedingly abundantly above all we could ask or think. And we, all too often, right, we fill ourselves up with all these other breads, so to speak, right? What are some of them you can think of? Like, where do we go for satisfaction that's not God? Yeah. Social media. There you go. That's one of them. Where else? Yes, sir. YouTube. Okay, yeah. Relationships. And maybe not you personally, but where do people go for satisfaction? Material possessions, absolutely. What else? Approval, yeah, approval, absolutely. We're looking for a pat on the back. We're looking for an attaboy, attagirl. What else? I mean, entertainment, sure. And listen, none of the things that we've mentioned so far are inherently bad things, right? There's nothing wrong with social media in moderation. There's nothing wrong with entertainment, with going to watch a movie or something. Nothing wrong with any of that. But when we are seeking those things to satisfy our spiritual hunger, we will find that they don't work. They don't satisfy the true need of our soul, which is that bread of life, which is Jesus. So we fill ourselves up on other breads. And we see even people who who don't know Christ, obviously even more so than we do, they do that. We see people in our culture look to so many things for satisfaction: drugs, alcohol, immorality, whatever the case may be. And yet, the true bread, Jesus Christ, the bread of life, he gives us more than those other breads ever will. So just think, what breads have you been guilty of trying to fill up on? You need more of the bread of life. I know I do. And sometimes our spiritual senses can become kind of dulled, and we don't even recognize how spiritually hungry we really are, and that we need Christ as the bread of life who satisfies not just our physical needs, but satisfies our soul. And he's the only one that can satisfy our soul. And so that's really the key here, that he says, I am the bread of life. As bread sustains physical life, so Christ offers and sustains spiritual life. And I know that so often we look to be satisfied in things that are not Christ. And often we know it. Right? How often have you been just like, man, I really need to sit down and read my Bible today. And then you don't do it maybe. Why? You even recognize sometimes what you need, and you still don't go and do it, right? Back to illustration with my wife and I. If she sees that I'm hungry, even if I don't recognize it, she might tell me, you need to eat something, and then I don't do it. What happens? Well, I become even more irritable and even more, of a jerk because I need to eat, right? And a lot of times we need to eat spiritually, whether we realize it or not. And so Jesus says, I am the bread of life. And before we go into our prayer time, I want to look at, just real quickly as kind of a precursor to next week, John chapter 8 and verse 12. And we'll look at the context of this more. We'll look at things. Yeah, do you? Sure, yeah. Hmm? Let me find it here.
We all agree that Jesus is the bread of life,
Mm-hmm.
and he's the one who sustains us,
Mm-hmm.
both body and soul.
Mm-hmm.
Then why do people turn back?
Well, why do people do that now? That's a good question, right?
I don't know who else has the words of eternal life, though, right?
What's that?
That's what Peter said. Who else has the words of eternal life?
Right. Well, I think it's just a matter of not seeing and understanding their true need. And it doesn't mean that they turned away from him permanently. Obviously, we know that that's not the case. That his disciples, at least the 12, they did follow him. But I think that we see a lot of times people walking away because they don't truly understand who he is and what their need is. And they may follow for a while and fall away. If they're truly his, they'll come back. We believe that. But did you have something, Emily?
In verse 64, he kind of calls out those who believe not.
Yeah.
Maybe they felt that,
Yeah, true.
calling out.
Yep, there are some of you that believe not. For Jesus knew from the beginning who they were that believed not and who should betray him. He knows who his true followers are, no doubt about that. So, a lot of things to think about. But let's look at John chapter 8 and verse 12. And this is the I am statement that we're going to look at next week. Then spake Jesus again unto them, saying, I am the light of the world. He that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life. I am the light of the world. To a world lost in darkness, Christ offers himself as a guide. I am the light of the world. We'll look at that next week. But any more questions about this bread of life? Questions, concerns, emotional outbursts, anything you want to throw at me? Yeah, Emily.
The question, what is spirit power? I was thinking, I just didn't say it. Desire for truth or meaning.
Desire for truth or meaning. Yeah. Well, that's sort of a universal thing, right? Like looking for meaning in life. That's definitely something we see a lot. Yes, sir. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah, I agree. Anybody else?